Welcome everybody. My name is Sarah McAllister and I'm hosting the November version of the LOF&BE webinar. Today, our speaker is Ido Marom. He received his bachelor's and master's degree from Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Transportation Sciences and received the Faculty Excellent Award for his thesis research. In between his studies, he also served 5 years in the Israeli Navy, rising to the rank of Senior Academic Officer, Deputy Chief of Meteorology Division. He currently works for the Ramat Gan municipality as a transportation planner. So he's the perfect person today to talk to us about wildfires in WUI fires in Israel. So just to remind everybody, keep yourself on mute and we'll do question and answers at the end through the chat box. So with that, go ahead, Ido.
Thank you very much. Okay, so today I'll talk a bit about fires in Israel, more in specific WUI fires in Israel, but I'll focus mainly on the November 2016 Haifa fire and some interactions and activities happening during the evacuation, during the fire that day. The research regarding after the fire was done during my master's degree under the supervision of Tomer Toledo. The photo you see here is from that fire in 2016 and is roughly 2 or 3 kilometers from the place I sit right now, from my home, and is roughly the same distance from my parents' home, also in Haifa. So I'm familiar with this specific fires, and fires happening in Haifa is not is quite memorable for me during the last few years and me growing up. So I'll talk a bit about fires in Israel and making my way to the November 2016 fire in Haifa, which is quite unique in Israel, being inside the urban and the WUI interference, making it a really interesting case study for evacuation and urban evacuation, but also about fires in urban areas. During the study, my main focus was on social decision making and the evacuation and activities happening during the evacuation. So I'll talk about it a bit later, but the main focus was about visiting home and child pickup analysis. So this is Israel, as you can see, and the eastern part of the Mediterranean, not far from Italy and Greece. Israel is on the edge of the desert, edge of the Sahara Desert on the one hand and the Arabian Desert on the other hand, having a mixture of Mediterranean climate and desert-like climate, making it allowing for pretty hot, dry summer with no rainfall. Most of the rainfall, exclusively happens during the winter. The summers are hot and without any precipitations, but quite humid near the coastline. Okay, thanks to the Mediterranean Sea. So the main fire season in Israel is during the fall, where we have when we have dry eastern winds during the month of September, October, November, and even December. I've just heard about a few fires happening today near Haifa and around Israel. As you can see, I'm wearing a T-shirt during November, so it's a bit chillier than the summer, but still those warm days are quite common. Also, relatively unique to Israel is having really large amount of pine trees that were planted during the last 100 years or so. We have that as a cause, as a fuel for fires. Talking about fires in Israel, of course, we're thinking about the northern parts where we have vegetation and not so much the desert parts. Thinking about fire studies in Israel, we're talking almost exclusively about man-induced fires with a handful of summer lightning storms that caused a few fires over the years, but mostly about human caused. Also thinking about fires in Israel, there is a lack of unified database to draw data from. There are some data from the fire and rescue services and from a few management agencies of fires in Israel that collect the data, at least the data from GIS data that is available. Also thinking about fires in Israel, there were a few reports about the management and of authorities during fires, specifically after the 2010 Mount Carmel fire that caused 44 casualties in December 2010. A report been made stated that authorities, and specifically local authorities, are not well prepared for fires. Talking about some causes for fires in Israel, so we have a lot of fires caused by garbage fires from illegal landfills, some arson or suspected arsons, and agriculture fires, of course, recreational in the forests and natural parks. But we also have some fires caused by the military training grounds that are less reported and that is less publicly available, and those fires occur in mostly in uninhabited area that are not represented so much in the data sets. So from this point onward, we'll talk mostly about Haifa and fires in and around Haifa. As you can see, Haifa is in the northern part of Israel, next to the Mediterranean Sea, is the home for almost 300,000 inhabitants, with roughly 1 million in the entire metropolis. Most of the fires in and around Haifa occurs actually south to the city in the Carmel Mountain, in and around here. You can see my pointer. This is most fires that occur roughly every 10 years, erupt in the Carmel Mountain and cause the damage a lot in the forested area, but it doesn't account for a lot of evacuation because, as I said, mostly fueled by eastern winds, taking the fire to the west and not so much near populated area, and causing some evacuation in the rural parts of Haifa or in the rural parts of Haifa or at some villages in the forest, and not so much in Haifa itself. The 2016 fire, on the other hand, occurred inside the urban area, and as I'll show you as I'll show you here, the Haifa area is integrated into the wildland. As you can see, the urban parts of the city is surrounded by the wildland areas, having neighborhoods on the ridge itself and going to the slopes, but having a lot of wildland areas still around the city and inside the city. The 2016 fire erupted inside the city itself, in the eastern parts of the residential area, going through wildland and urban parts of the city and going to more open wildland area in the western parts of the city. As we can see, goes straight through the wildland urban interference and is a really good example of a fire of that sort. Also, it's worth mentioning that the fire ignited in mid-morning, about 11 a.m. On a weekday, so people were either at work or school or going about their day. So this is a midday evacuation. The fire extinguished the next day, so people were able to come home. So we're talking about a really short occurrences and not an evacuation, at least for people that had their home intact. They were able to come back the next day. Though no casualties there were no casualties in the fire, still almost 200 buildings were damaged and 40,000 people were evacuated, which is about 15% of the Haifa population. Other studies regarding that fire that exist that are available, I'll talk about cultural aspects of being in the near fire area, and about the restoration after the fire, and also about balancing WUI areas with fire risks. My study focuses mostly on activities and transportation-related decision-making. So, as we know in the group, we talk about a bit about the fire evacuation during fires. We know that most of the data is hurricane-related, and there's a lot of SP data, data preference data. A lot of studies focus on the decision to evacuate. Though still some studies do take into account activities and intra-household interaction, specifically mentioning child pickup, which I'll mention in this case later on, and the tendency to evacuate together. Also is mentioned a lot the notion of protecting one's home, which is more common in rural areas or suburban area where you live in a private residency, which is not really common and not common for the places that in Haifa. So it's not really relevant for the areas that we're thinking about them in Haifa. The case study or the study, we analyzed first and foremost the evacuation decision making and the decision to evacuate or not. We talked also about the travel patterns and I'll examine them, going deeper into analyzing intra-household decision making and even some social and inter-household decision making. The data that we used was collected at a survey about 6 months after the fire and included the answers from about 200 households, where a representative of the household answered for the entire household's whereabouts that day. The survey looks like a bit like a travel diary, where you mention stops and the trips in between those stops, activities, made, and also accompanying others to trips. So one might mention that other households members were present in their trip, and even non-household member could be represented in that sense. Of course, we collected some social demographic data regarding the households. It should be mentioned that this is a lengthy survey where you need to answer for each household member. That might take longer times to answer, and you need to know what other household members have done during that day, and is based on the memory that you'd have of the event of the day a few months afterwards. The sample is in many senses representative of the area: upper middle class, young families, some Technion students that were also represented in the sample because the Technion itself was evacuated during the day. We see high vehicle ownership, and also some representative of single-person households, but mostly resemble to the characteristics of those neighborhoods that were evacuated. First and foremost, we thought about the factors influencing the decision to evacuate, very much like others have done, distinguishing between individual and household characteristics that influence the decision to evacuate, and the event characteristics itself. This data is allow us to see if the data in the fire is similar to other cases, and is very much similar to other cases. Seeing this is the evacuation decision model, which is a logic discrete choice model, where we can have higher values and positive values mentioning an increase in the likelihood of evacuation, and negative values representing lower or negative correlation to evacuation. And of course, we can see that the evacuation decision is based largely on the danger opposed to the household, and the other factors that are most prominently related to evacuation, having children at home, and so on, negatively with pets, similarly to other events. Going deeper into the data, we wanted to analyze the trips themselves and the day pattern that people took that day. So we looked at the patterns that people made, and this is a representative example of a household and household travel diary the day. So we have one adult individual at work, outside the city boundaries, outside Haifa, and another one at the Technion, where a minor is at school inside the city of Haifa, but outside the area affected by the fire. This is the place where those family members were at the beginning of the event, before they heard about the ignition, the fire. So the first step that we see, the first trip, is going to school, picking up the child, going away from the city, outside the city, meeting up outside the city in the train station or public place. But later on, we see one adult is going back home to the fire area, fire affected area, to collect personal belongings, to assess the situation, and later on decide to evacuate completely. We'll see later that those behaviors, the child pickup and visiting home, is very much present in the data and very much representative of the behaviors that day. So beside the decision to evacuate or not, in the literature itself, we see much discussion about the usage, the mode usage, indicating that most people use a private vehicle for the evacuation, or even using more than one vehicle for the evacuation. There are some notion, mostly from stated preference studies, about child pickup, relative pickup, and gathering together as a household before evacuating. And those are behaviors that we wanted to analyze and see if we can identify in our data and in our case study. We also see a bit of discussion about a wider social network, more specifically with interviews that have been conducted after evacuation. We wanted to see if we can represent this data in a larger sample and see some statistics about it in our case. I'll show some of the major findings regarding those decisions. As I mentioned earlier, most people decided to evacuate. You can see most people from those areas actually evacuated. Most of them, of course, using private vehicle. And there's almost no usage of public transportation that day, which makes sense because the network itself wasn't functioning the same as usual, as the bus lines were cut through by the fire and by roadblocks. Focusing later on, we focus on the intermediate stops, and so I'll dig into it a bit more. But two major stops that we found were actually stopping at home, going back home, and child pickup, which been shown earlier, but also identified some waiting patterns, waiting before evacuating or waiting even before going back home. So if we think about activities being done, we're thinking about the intermediate stops that are being made that day, and we can see for even those that stayed put, we have one intermediate stop between their initial location and their final destination, finally coming back home. But also evacuated people made quite a bit of intermediate stops, either to collect children or to go back home. We can see that even single household members, single household individuals some of them made a stop, an intermediate stop before coming to the final destination, but mostly adults in child with children in the household made a lot of intermediate stops. We wanted to investigate those intermediate stops were a major focus for us. If we think about one intermediate stop, that represents twice the amount of twice the amount of trips compared to being evacuated straightforward. This could have an effect on the traffic that day, and a major effect on the traffic in those cases. So thinking about those stops, we first focused on stopping at home. 80% of those evacuated had a stop at home. Either someone from their household. Either someone from the household started the day at home, or had someone coming back home. So 50% of the household that evacuated also had someone coming back home during that day. This is a lot of travel, and we know that during the day, the police didn't allow for some to come back home, using roadblocks and stopping people from coming back to neighborhoods affected, causing a lot of traffic, lot of traffic jams during the day. People wanted to come back home and not being able to do so, or people going out and inside the affected area, and not just going outside the affected area. Digging a bit deeper into the activities being done in those intermediate stops, we see two major activities. We see picking up and waiting. Also evident are activities related to visiting home, such as picking up belonging or taking care of pets, or protecting the property a bit. But besides the home-based activities, we see waiting patterns where people do an intermediate evacuation, stopping at a friend's home, or even at home, and waiting to decide whether to evacuate completely or going back home. We can, if thinking about waiting, it makes sense. It might have mitigating effects, some relief to gather information, where in this event, which is a day event and a really short-term event, you don't have a lot of information on what's going on, if you're able to come home or not being able to come home. And analyzing the waiting pattern, we see that this activity was much lengthier than other activities done that day. So some people had most of the day waiting before deciding to either evacuate completely or come back home. Another major focus point is the picking up section. We can see people making pickup activities for entire, regardless of their social relation, having even single person household picking up or being picked up, as long as people with children in the household or childless households. We decided to focus mainly on the child pickup from school, as it was a daytime event. Children are at school, and this is we figured out that this should be a major activity for households. So I'll discuss that in a second. But before picking up the children, we think about gathering as a concept of itself. In this table, we can see that group sizes increase regardless of the household, where from the first to the second trip, we can see the average group size increase almost by 1. We can also see that children do not travel alone, and from this point we investigate child pickup. But this is also true for all other types of households. That the sense of gathering is very much present for all kinds of households, and this should be interpreted by doing those intermediate stops. Also relevant to note here is that about 30% of the people in those groups, in those travel groups, were out of household members. So this might have a bit of an indication for a larger circle social structure that should be incorporated in this data. So think about the child pickup. As I mentioned, children do not travel alone, and there's a lot of children in Israel. Households in Israel are quite big. The household size in Israel is quite big. With you can see the fertility rate in Israel. So this could be a major focus point in Israel. But trying to figure out who pick up the children is might be a reasonable place to start from. And in our data, at least for our case, we see, to make much sense, that 50% of the children were picked up by adults in their households. But we have another 40% of children being picked up by people not from their household, either non-household member, relatives, could be grandparents or uncles and aunts, or even older siblings not living in the same household. But we also have other non-family members picking up the children. Those might be children evacuating with classmates to their friends' home and later being picked up by their parents. So think about the evacuation of children from schools. We understand now that focusing only about the household is not enough. Our data didn't include much social data regarding non-household members joining the group. We only know that we only distinguished between non-household member relative and other not from the household. But we cannot say who are those not from the household that picked up the children. We didn't think about it before distributing the survey. But apparently this is a major focus in those kind of evacuations. So we wanted to understand if we wanted to model the decision to pick up children. So we focused. We tried to make a model to model the decision to evacuate, the decision to who would pick up children. And this model was a bit complex, but it was eventually a discrete choice between a few options. But the model allowed us to understand that in many senses, the child pickup activity is rational. So we'd have people closer to the fire, closer to the area, having a higher chance of picking up children, and there's a lower chance if a car is not available to pick up, and we have higher chances of adult, more mature children at the age of high school going by themselves, or picking up younger siblings from school. Also, worth mentioning that higher danger to the home is negatively correlated with the children evacuating by themselves. So being at high risk induce the chances that the children would be picked up. Also worth mentioning is that during the event, there were some efforts to evacuate children by the municipality, but buses distributed to schools were stuck in traffic, so they were not able to reach schools, and the pickup was eventually a task done by the household or other relatives, as mentioned earlier. I'll start a bit to wrap up some of the conclusion that we've made during the event. This is again a photo from the event itself. We can see that the fires going through near the buildings, and we can see the forest that is integrated in the city. So we analyzed the evacuation decision itself, and understand that is a dynamic process where we have waiting periods during the evacuation decision, and might have people not evacuating immediately, or trying to understand whether or not they want to evacuate and collect data during the event. We see other other activities being done during the event, such as gathering or going back home, which is quite important for the management of the event. We also see that a wider social circle interaction, wider social circle interact with the household during the child pickup process, but also for other gathering activities. Later studies should also incorporate others not from the household in those decision making. We also understand the influence of the event management on the activities being taken, being done, and also the effect of activities on the management of the event. If we think about gathering or visiting home as an activity, natural activities of people that they want to do, if they want to go back home, then we should understand how we allow it to happen, or when we don't allow it to happen, but we should be prepared for it to happen. People evidently want to go back home, and of course they want to pick up their children from school, or they want to make sure they're safe, even with others, as we can see that even non-household members took part in picking up children. So this should be incorporated into any event management. Other things to put in mind is a bit of a limitation of the data. As I said, this survey was conducted post-event and relied on self-reporting of data after a period of time. So we have to put in mind the passage of time that might affect the data, and the lack of generic survey that we didn't have to distribute, that could incorporate some cultural differences in mind, and ought to be developed, or should be. Another information gaps that we hold is the effect of traffic conditions on the decision making. We can see we didn't have exact pinpoint positions of activities being done, so we cannot correlate between the activities and the trips and the traffic conditions during the day. Also is not entirely clear is, of course, the influence of beyond the households, as we don't have a lot of information on those individuals. Okay, so I'd like to thank you all for coming, and open up the session if anyone wants to ask some questions. This photo is taken from my parents' home at the 2010 fire from the Kamal Mountain. So this is not from that day event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ido. That's a great talk. Fascinating the differences in the daytime evacuations versus like a nighttime evacuation, right? Where people are, already at home and don't have to go home to get their things to their kids. So one thing that struck me while we're waiting for, there's already a question in the chat box, but I want to ask you one quick question first. So you had mentioned that predominantly people were evacuating by private vehicles. So is it common for people living in the city to own private vehicles?
Okay, so yeah, so in Haifa, car usage is relatively high, and especially in those areas are people own a car. Most of the households own a car in those areas at least, but also in other parts of Haifa. Though the public transportation system is relatively quite good and used by children in those neighborhoods. Children usually use public transportation to go to school and other day-to-day. But
yeah, I mean, I can imagine how much of an issue there would be if everybody was relying on the public transportation to say commute to work, and then suddenly a fire breaks out and they're not near their vehicle and they can't get home because the bus is shut down. Oh, what a mess that would be. So it sounds like it was lucky that everything kind of worked out that way and people could, get in and out. So the question here in the chat box from one of my co-hosts on this, Sam Manzello, I think I brain farted and forgot to mention both Sam and Sayaka earlier when I was introducing the talk today. But so Sam asks, he knows that there have been several fires in Haifa from 1998 through 2016. Do you have a sense if more fires will happen in the near future?
So those fires happened mostly outside the city in the Carmel Mountain, a bit south to the city, where fires happens for decades. Actually, it's not uncommon, and it happens year-round. About every decade, every 10 years, there's a fire, or so 5 to 10 years. So those fires occurred and will occur in the future. There is, we think about a bit of climate change, of course, makes sense here, but here in Israel it makes the autumn, the fall a bit longer. In a way, we see longer fall with those dry eastern winds. So it might make sense that the fire will erupt in the city of Haifa. It's not it makes sense that it will happen again. And actually today there were a few fires that started and put out quite easily, but it's not uncommon, and it's plausible that another fire would erupt in a few years that will get out of control, like that one got out of control.
It's an interesting, the east wind issue, because so I went to school at UC Berkeley in Berkeley, California, right? And our fire days in that area are on east wind days, sort of a similar thing where you get the dry wind coming from inland pushing towards the coast, and they happen in the fall. And so very interesting, the similarities. You have this great picture of Carmel Mountain here, and you mentioned that there are other big fires there. What's the vegetation type on that? Is that some of the planted pine, or is that all native?
Okay, so I studied transportation, and that's my
engineer. So
that's my field of expertise, and that's what I can tell about. But just living by the place and knowing a bit from my general knowledge is it's a mixture. The pine trees are planted during the last centuries, but it also there's a lot of natural vegetation, but which is Mediterranean oak trees and some undergrowth, which is native to the area, but also some unnatural pine trees that were brought and planted. It changes over the last years in the restoration, trying to make it.
I gotcha. It sounds like either way, that's flammable, fire-prone vegetation. So
yeah, either way.
Fires are going to be a thing in your future, no matter what. Well, yeah, that's very interesting. I'm looking through my notes here to see if there was, because every question that I kind of came up with, you sort of answered as you talked. So it was really interesting to see the breakdown of like the ages of the children and what that, how that affected the decisions on where to go and who was picking up whom and how that was done. So yeah, great work there. That was interesting.
We think that some children were picked up by their older children. It's kind of hard to identify from the data, but it makes sense in those places that children were picked up by older siblings. It's not an uncommon behavior in Israel. And so it's a breakdown of the ages.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense too if you have an older teenager whose school is next or nearby in the same neighborhood as the younger child versus your parent that's probably off at work somewhere far removed. So yeah, that was interesting. Well, I don't have any other questions. If anybody else wants to type anything in the chat box, we'll give it a few more minutes. But yeah, I thought it was also interesting that the university had to evacuate as well, because I can imagine that that's a very different process than getting a normal household to evacuate.
That's true. In this case, the Technion actually had to be evacuated and caused a lot of traffic problems in and around the Technion. Most of the fire affect the University of Haifa, which is up on the Carmel Mountain, and was not evacuated at this fire specifically, but other fires, this is very common for the University of Haifa, which is a different campus from the Technion, that evacuate each time, and it's a cause for concern. Actually, today there was a fire just near the university, and I think it wasn't evacuated, but it was put out quite easily, quite quick. But it's in many senses, it does happen a lot of times.
So I guess that follow on to that is, is it common for students to live on campus because they might not have their own vehicles if that's the case?
Yeah, so we think that a lot of the households that didn't report having a vehicle were students living in the Technion, where they really don't have a private vehicle. The Technion itself wasn't affected by the fire, so even those that did not evacuate from the Technion, they weren't harmed. It is a of concern, and it's well known that during the 2010 fire, which was a really quite unique other case, forest fire near Haifa, which didn't cause a lot of evacuation, but the university did evacuate, and there are reports of people carpooling together, and so there's a wide. This is the wider social circle that come into place that it's really hard to analyze and really hard to identify in a study, in a large sample study. But those are some of the behaviors of students evacuating together.
I see. Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that would be a challenge, I imagine, to try to tease out and understand. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat box. So thank you again, Ido, for a wonderful talk and introducing us to the fires were in your neck of the woods there. So yeah, fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, if you weren't able to join us, it'll be on YouTube. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.